Imagine you get off work a little bit too late to make dinner. So you stop by your favorite fast food place and you order. You think everything is normal, well, except for the cheat meal, but the person who just took your order is currently being trafficked. In fact, everyone preparing your food is currently being trafficked. You see, that sounds insane, but this actually happened. Because this whole story starts in rural England and ends with police uncovering a family-run trafficking operation, which involved stolen wages, confiscated passports, and workers sleeping 6 people in just one room. Because when most people think of modern slavery, most likely they're thinking about this is all happening in a country far, far away. Or if it's happening in the West, it's hidden, out of sight, out of mind. But in this case, it was hiding in broad daylight, a simple McDonald's location. According to prosecutors in the United Kingdom, this is exactly what happened.
Now, a BBC investigations discovered that multiple signs of slavery were missed after 9 men were trafficked from the Czech Republic and forced to work at a UK McDonald's restaurant by a criminal gang. Other victims were enslaved and put to work at a factory supplying bread products to major food retailers. Baroness Theresa May, who introduced anti-slavery legislation, says the case raises shocking questions about how big companies address modern slavery.
So last week, Jan Drovanik and his partner, Monica Olahova, they were sentenced to prison for their roles in a trafficking network. And this was apparently a family-owned and ran operation because by the time all the trials were over, multiple members of the same family had been convicted in connection with this whole system. And I realize this topic is a little bit outside of what we normally talk about here on this channel, but due to how bizarre it was and my curiosity for this case, I just, we had to talk about this because this is crazy. It's not every day you hear about an entire McDonald's location being operated by slaves in the West. A full staff of slaves. How is this possible? Well, I guess we'll find out because the group spent years targeting vulnerable people in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and many of the victims were unemployed, homeless, and struggling with addiction, or simply they were just desperate for some fresh start. I guess the pitch was to come on out to the UK because they'll help you find work and help you find housing, and you can have a chance to build a better life over here. And I guess if you just lost your job and someone offers you transportation, housing, and employment in another country, that's, you know, an opportunity that a lot of people would take. I mean, who would not want an opportunity to live in the country of Greggs and Poundland? Yes, that's a real store that I did actually shop at because I did also live in the UK for a little bit. Show a picture of Poundland. Shout out Poundland. The economy's really been giving our wallets a pounding, so Poundland is a hero. Poundland is essentially just Dollar General store, but in the UK. But I don't know if you noticed or not, but we just dropped the Atozy Gamer Subs Cup. So this is the first step in getting a flavor at Gamer Subs. Essentially, they said, hey, make a shaker cup. So me and my designer from Mad City, Gloom, we went all in on the shaker cup and we tried to make the coolest shaker cup that's currently on the website. That was our goal. Let me know what you think. I'm really happy with the outcome of it, and currently it's available for a limited time only. So for the next couple of weeks, you can pre-order this and then it's gone forever. And if you don't know what Gamer Subs is, they make some of the best sugar-free drinks on the market. They do them with and without caffeine, and they have a wide range of flavors ranging from the lemonade that I keep raving about to Chug Juice to Moist Critical's Goof Juice, and so on and so on. I mean, they also have the canned beverages as well. So for me to join the big leagues over here and actually get my own flavor, I have to see if I can actually sell some cups first, because I want my own flavor called Memory Lane Melon, which I want it to be a vanilla honeydew melon flavor. I feel like that's a unique flavor that hasn't been done in an energy drink. I think it'll be good both in the powder form and eventually in a sparkling canned beverage. So we shall see. Feel free to support the channel by getting a cup, and let's continue the video. Regardless, let's get a little serious again. So the victim at the center of this latest case, he lost his job when John befriended him in the Czech Republic. So John Drovanik, he promised to help him find work and housing in Britain and arranged his travel to the UK. And they apparently had an understanding that the cost would eventually be repaid from his wages once he got settled in. So I guess he thought that seems reasonable enough. Except prosecutors say that after arriving in Britain in early 2018, things changed pretty drastically because the man eventually found himself living with Drovanik while working in a McDonald's restaurant in Cambridgeshire. And I mean, that's fine, except he wasn't actually seeing the money from his job. And once investigators started looking into where these paychecks were actually going, they discovered that this wasn't just one worker with a bad boss. It was something way larger than this. Because between March and October of 2018, the victim worked at at a McDonald's restaurant in Caxton Gibbet in Cambridgeshire. According to court testimony, these were not casual part-time shifts either. He was regularly working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Okay, that is a lot of hours for no pay. Like, how are they getting away with sending a guy to work for 72 hours and not paying him? Like, no one noticed that this dude was always there, and I guess somehow also not getting paid? Imagine standing in the fluorescent lights of a McDonald's for 72 hours a week and not getting paid. That is probably the definition of hell. And apparently the definition of modern slavery, because according to prosecutors, during that period, he earned more than 12,000 pounds in wages. But the problem was those wages weren't being paid into his bank account. Instead, they were being deposited into an account controlled by Monica Olahova. And by the time this was all said and done, prosecutors say the victim had earned over $12,000 and personally received just 90 pounds. What? 90 pounds for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for what? Almost 6 months? We need to do the math there. All right. Ignore my pajamas. We gotta bust out the calculator. All right. 12 hours times 6 equals 72. 72-hour work weeks times 4. That's a month. 288 hours a month times 6 equals 1,728. 90 divided by 1,728 equals 5 cents an hour. 5 cents an hour is what this guy was getting. That's crazy. But to make things worse, when he was asking where the rest of his money was going, he was told it was being used to repay the cost of bringing him to the United Kingdom, along with food and accommodation expenses. So, remember, he was allegedly living in a room with 6 other people. Something's not adding up. Okay, so if that was true, this is no longer a bad employment arrangement, but more like a debt trap. But of course, it gets worse because Drevenak also controlled the victim's passport and documents. And the victim also testified that he was assaulted on more than one occasion and was dependent on Drevenak for transportation to and from work. Also, Drevenak was apparently so unreliable that there were times he simply left the victim at the restaurant overnight. Like, imagine finishing your shift at McDonald's and realizing your ride home has essentially abandoned you in the parking lot. You're just there until the morning. Imagine moving from Eastern Europe to United Kingdom to essentially just perpetually be stuck in a McDonald's. Honestly, it sounds like a horror game. But this is where the story stops being about just one victim, but about the whole operation. Because according to investigators, the man in this case was not the only person recruited through the system. Police also eventually uncovered what they described as a family-run trafficking network that had brought vulnerable people from the Czech Republic and Slovakia into the United Kingdom over a period of years. Right now, 16 victims have been identified. 9 of them worked at the same McDonald's restaurant in Caxton. So I guess this guy was driving a freaking shuttle bus to McDonald's twice a day? Like, hello? But I guess for those who didn't have to work at the McDonald's, they had to work at a bread factory that supplied products to British supermarkets. And some also worked at both locations. So they were just super lucky, apparently. But BBC did an investigation into this. And according to that report, there were some serious warning signs everywhere. So at least 4 workers at the McDonald's reportedly had their wages paid into the same bank account. Hey, that's the first red flag. But then job applications were allegedly completed by gang members, and translators apparently sat in on the interviews, and multiple employees shared the same address. Some workers were apparently even putting in extreme hours, with one reportedly working a 30-hour shift. 30 hours at the McDonald's. I guess that was one of the times he forgot to pick the guy up, and I guess he just continued his shift. But I mean, look, I have never managed a McDonald's before. I've actually only had 3 jobs. I worked as a paper boy, or like paper delivery route, a janitor, and YouTuber. So McDonald's manager, that's never been on the resume, so there might be a few things I'm missing. But if 4 employees are being paid into the same bank account and they all live together and they don't speak English and somebody else is handling all their paperwork and picking them up and dropping them off, and sometimes they're just left here overnight, wouldn't that raise some red flags? Hello? Wouldn't there be some, I don't know, follow-up questions when you start noticing some of these red flags? Like, imagine the dude just walks out of a shift and he just like stands there in the parking lot for 12 hours and then his shift starts back again and then he's just on for 12 hours. Like, you just see a time lapse of him like leaving the McDonald's store and he just walks over and he just stands in the parking lot like this for 12 hours. It's just a time lapse. I wonder what's in this bad boy. I don't know, but so much about this story is just so obviously messed up. And the whole housing situation was also worse because some victims were forced to live in overcrowded properties. And in one house, 6 grown men were sharing a single bedroom. And to make things worse, neighbors also told reporters they kept seeing large amounts of men coming in and out of the same property, but assumed it was simply just an extended family living together. But that is one very big extended family. Because I mean, like, if you're in a small council estate and you have 6 men in each room, and let's say it's a 3-bedroom, do they actually have like 18 men living in one little council estate? Dude, that's just crazy. But I mean, also just looking at these pictures, if 6 men were forced to sleep in this room, they were probably really looking forward to their shifts and probably didn't even want to go home. Yeah, this is messed up. This is just cooked. How do you fix 6 people? Like, do they all, I guess the entire floor at night. So they folded up the mattresses, I'm guessing, and they just kind of like fold them down on the floor and then 6 dudes just sleep there. Oh man. But I guess, I mean, if you're wondering how something like this keeps people trapped for years, that's where the prosecution's description of invisible handcuffs comes in. Because whenever people hear the phrase modern slavery, they tend to imagine someone, physically chained up somewhere. But normally, that's not the case. Because many of the victims didn't speak English, their passports and identification documents, they'd allegedly been taken, and they had little to no access to their own money. Then to make things worse, the people exploiting them controlled where they lived, how they got to work, and in some cases, how they even communicated with the outside world. So I mean, even if they wanted to leave, where were they gonna go? You're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, you don't have your documents, and you don't have your paycheck. Like, that's why investigators say victims were actively trapped despite not being physically locked in a room. But apparently, some victims did try to escape. Workers would flee back to the Czech Republic only to be tracked down and trafficked back to the UK again. I mean, that is just a whole new level of being stuck in purgatory. But meanwhile, prosecutors say the people who were running this whole thing were doing quite well for themselves.
Forced to live in an attic and an unheated, leaking out building, victims were found legitimate jobs by a criminal gang led by brothers Ernest and Steněk Drevenák, who referred to them as livestock and stole hundreds of thousands of pounds from their wages to fund luxury lifestyles, new cars, gold jewelry, and foreign holidays.
This is literally a picture that Drevenák posted of him just chilling on the beach. And this, of course, is all while the whole operation was going on. So while I guess he had a whole bunch of people permanently stuck at a McDonald's location, he could just relax on the beach somewhere. In another branch of this case, investigators estimated the network stole at least 200,000 pounds from workers over a 4-year period. And again, this is all somehow through a McDonald's location in the UK. So again, like, how did this go on without anyone noticing? Because after the investigation, McDonald's announced that it had commissioned an independent review and updated its system to better detect things like shared bank accounts, excessive working hours, and the use of interpreters during interviews. And I feel like those are like one of those things that maybe should have been there. Like, they just kind of like announced, like, good news, everyone. We've introduced these new safeguards that probably should have been there from the start, but hey, we fixed it, guys. And the company also says on its human rights page that it reassesses its policies through consultation and benchmarking to reflect the latest insights. And I mean, thankfully, they at least acknowledged this and did make changes as soon as this came to light. But I mean, that's definitely a problem with the whole franchisee model, because at the end of the day, apparently you never really know who's a franchisee of yours. But obviously, McDonald's is not the only blame here. It's just extremely dystopian that pretty much the entire McDonald's staff were slaves. I mean, that's just crazy. But obviously, they didn't only work at McDonald's, they also worked at a bread factory. And according to the BBC, victims were also working there for years before the operation was finally uncovered, which means this wasn't just a story about one restaurant. No, this is a story about how a trafficking network managed to operate across multiple businesses for years without being detected. And obviously, we've already stated the massive red flags here. But according to investigators, the operation finally began to unravel in 2019. Because victims contacted police in the Czech Republic, who then passed the information to the British authorities. So in October of 2019, specialist officers began speaking with workers connected to the McDonald's operation, and several victims agreed to leave the officers immediately, while others followed shortly after. And the first convictions came against Ernest Devenbrock and his partner, Veronika Bubenikova. I am butchering names here left and right, probably. Apologies. But prosecutors described them as central figures in the operation, and another brother, Steněk Drevenák, was also later convicted as a part of the wider case as well. But then you had the trial about John Drevenák and Monika Olachova, the people we started this video about. So prosecutors alleged that John was responsible for recruiting the victim at the center of this latest case and arranging his travel to the UK and controlling his documents and taking a vast majority of the money that he earned. Olahova's bank account was used to receive the victim's wages, while he received only a tiny fraction of what he actually earned. And after the trial, both were found guilty of arranging transport for exploitation and holding a person in slavery. And John Drevenik was actually sentenced to 8 years in prison, while Monica received 6.5 years. That sounds extremely low for what they did. I mean, for that kind of exploitation, isn't that kind of a slap on the wrist? I don't know about you guys, but if you're doing this, I'm sorry. You didn't work out in society. Now you have at least a 25-year timeout. That's crazy. I guess modern slavery can give you only 6 years in prison in the UK. Regardless, that's how apparently for many years people could go to a McDonald's in the UK and accidentally be funding slavery. Imagine you're just ordering your food and everyone inside of the McDonald's making your food is trafficked. That would be crazy. It is crazy. And apparently it happened. So that was the story of how all that happened. A little bit of a different video. I just wanted to talk about it because I thought this story was crazy. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.